Hey guys, tonight we dive deep into a time when sandals slapped on marble floors, togas rustled with secrets, and justice, well, it got creative. We're headed to ancient Rome, but not the postcard version with heroic gladiators and fountains. No, tonight you're walking into the shadows, into courtrooms echoing with fate and punishments that could make your soul wince. You're about to meet the Vestal Virgins, Rome's most sacred women, and find out what happened when they slipped up. Spoiler, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk along the Via Sacra, the sacred way. Temples loom above, their columns casting long shadows in the fading gold of Roman twilight. Up ahead, the House of the Vestals stands pristine, 3 stories of polished elegance, hiding a ticking clock for any girl sworn to purity inside its walls. You feel the hush. These 6 women, chosen before puberty, hold Rome's fate in their breath. The Vestal Virgins are said to keep the sacred flame burning in the Temple of Vesta. No flame, no Rome. Simple. But that oath of virginity? That's where things get dangerously rigid. Now imagine you're one of them. You've spent 10 years learning rituals, 10 more performing them, and a final 10 training the next girls. No husbands, no flirtation, not even gossip, lest the gods catch wind. Break that vow, and you're not just dishonored, you've committed sacrilege against the state. And Rome doesn't let that go. When a Vestal is found guilty of impurity, the trial is swift and oddly polite. There's no public flogging or screaming mobs. No one dares touch a Vestal, not even in punishment. Instead, the high priest offers a gentle ceremony. You're dressed in white, given food, offered last prayers, and then you're led outside the city walls to a freshly dug chamber. This isn't metaphorical. You're literally buried alive. The chamber is stocked with a loaf of bread, a lamp, water, and a bit of comfort food. As if Rome hopes the gods might reconsider. The top is sealed, earth shoveled in, and just like that you're entombed, alive but untouched, condemned by law yet treated like a relic. It's punishment by loophole. Since no one can kill a Vestal, they simply trap her underground and let time do the rest. The fringe detail? The funeral was often held before the sentence was passed. Historians still argue whether the entire trial was just a pageant, a show to mask the inevitability. Some say the emperor's hand always steered the outcome. You're lying in darkness now. The oil lamp flickers, casting dancing shadows on curved dirt walls. Above you, feet crunch gravel as they retreat. The chamber is quiet, except for your own heartbeat. Your stomach grumbles. Your fingers find the crust of bread. And you realize this is it. You might expect horror stories to fade over time, but the fate of the impure Vestals haunted Roman culture. Centuries later, writers still whispered about Domitilla, the noble woman rumored to have been falsely accused. Others insisted on political setups, claiming powerful families used the Vestals as pawns. The question wasn't just did she sin? It was who wanted her gone. You'd think this might deter girls from joining, and yet many still did. The position came with wealth, freedom from male guardianship, and immense respect. But always the threat lingered. Just one misstep, real or invented, and you were headed for a lonely grave. Even the site outside the calling gate where the punishment took place was considered cursed. People avoided it. Birds refused to land there, supposedly. One poet joked that even the underworld sent back the souls of punished Vestals because they still burned too bright. You shift slightly in your sleep chamber, trying not to imagine spiders exploring the corners. That soft white tunic you're wearing, suddenly not so comfortable. Above you, Rome glows in torchlight, carrying on as if nothing happened. You wonder if the sacred flame is still burning. You wonder if anyone noticed you're gone. And somewhere far above, in a temple of marble and gold, another girl kneels beside the altar. Eyes closed, whispering prayers, hoping the gods accept her offering before they ask for hers in return. The scent hits you first, sweet myrtle smoke and fresh-cut roses. You're in the gardens of Nero's palace, and everything smells too pleasant. The laughter floating through the evening air is brittle, a little too loud, like guests at a party who don't know when it's time to leave. Torches line the walkways, casting long, flickering shadows, except not all of them are torches. You notice one burning figure doesn't flicker like the others. Its arms don't move. It doesn't crackle. It just stands there. That's when you realize it isn't wood. It's a human body wrapped in pitch-soaked cloth, burning from the feet up. Welcome to the Garden of Nero. You are now officially Roman ambience. Nero, emperor of indulgence and unfiltered drama, had a taste for the theatrical. You might remember him as the guy who fiddled while Rome burned, though historians still argue whether he actually played music or if that was just poetic shade. What's more certain is how he responded to the aftermath of the Great Fire of 64 CE. Someone had to take the blame, and Nero, ever the crowd pleaser, picked the new, mysterious group causing murmurs around town. The Christians. They didn't honor the Roman gods. They kept to themselves. They were weird, perfect scapegoats. So he rounds them up, and you're one of them. The charges are vague. Something about superstition, foreign rites, public disturbance. You're sentenced to death, but not the dull kind. No beheadings for this PR stunt. Nero wants a show. You're coated in resin and pitch, then tied to a post. The heat is immediate. The fire licks upward, the sticky fuel clinging to your legs. And as the flames rise, Nero walks by with guests, some laughing nervously, others refusing to look. He calls it illumination. It's all part of his aesthetic. Here's the mainstream historical anchor. Tacitus, the Roman historian, wrote with barely concealed revulsion about this moment. He admitted Christians were unpopular, but he still called the punishment excessive cruelty. That's saying something in Rome. What makes it worse, if that's possible, is the party vibe. This isn't punishment, it's performance. Nero wasn't content to just execute. He turned death into garden decor. Fringe fact? There's speculation that some of these living torches might not have been entirely dead when the parties began. Sedated, yes, but alive. Not confirmed, but it's been whispered in enough scrolls to keep you up at night. You sway gently in the heat. The pitch sizzles, and the flames crackle like autumn leaves. Somewhere, a flute begins to play. Guests nibble figs and debate poetry. One asks if the firelight makes her toga look more radiant. You feel your skin split and your breath catch, but no one looks at you. That would be rude. Nero strides past. His robes glitter like spilled wine. He pauses briefly, considers your suffering with the cool detachment of a man judging a painting. Then he nods. More resin on the next one, he says. You don't scream. You can't. The smoke fills your lungs, and your body is no longer yours. You're a torch now, a feature, a mood. Historians debate Nero's actual role. Some say he never personally ordered these executions, that it was all a convenient urban legend. Others argue it was precisely the kind of thing he'd do, tasteless, over the top, and cruelly theatrical. Either way, his name stuck. When later Christians needed a villain, Nero was already burning. And long after the fires died, whispers remained. The phrase Nero's torches lived on. Artists painted them. Poets wrote them into tragedy. And people lit candles in church not just for peace, but in defiance of what light had once meant. You fade into ember now, your soul rising with the ash. Somewhere in the palace, music swells again. A new guest arrives, more laughter, more wine, another party in the gardens, and just beyond the rose trellis, the posts are being scrubbed down, ready for tomorrow night's entertainment. You wake up in a sack. No, really. It's dark, it smells like old leather and fear, and something just brushed against your leg. Was that fur? Let's rewind. You've just been convicted of parricide, killing a parent, the ultimate taboo in Roman eyes. They believed that to murder the very people who gave you life was to tear apart the natural order of the universe. Other crimes were bad, sure, but this one? Cosmic-level disrespect. And so, Rome responded with a punishment so elaborate, so theatrical, it makes being set on fire at a garden party seem oddly restrained. They called it the poena culli, the punishment of the sack. Here's how it works. You, the accused, are sewn into a large sack made of tough oxhide, but you're not alone in there. Rome believed symbolic harmony mattered, so into the sack go 4 animals, a dog, a monkey, a snake, and a rooster. Yes, it's basically a psychotic menagerie of doom. Why those animals? Historians still argue whether they symbolize betrayal, chaos, or just created maximum panic. Some believe the dog represented loyalty betrayed, the snake cunning, the monkey mockery, and the rooster, well, maybe just for added noise. Inside the sack, it's hot and chaotic. The dog is snarling, the monkey's screeching, the snake is writhing somewhere near your spine, and the rooster is flapping in a panic. The sack shifts violently as everyone inside tries to escape everyone else. But there's no escape. Then comes the worst part. They throw the whole sack into the river. You're tumbling now, helpless, water pressing in. You think for a second that maybe it'll be quick. But the leather resists the water. It's not an immediate drowning. It's slow, terrifying, and bizarrely loud inside your aquatic coffin. You catch glimpses of open water through tiny seams in the stitching. The last light fades. The animals grow quiet, either dead or exhausted, and you realize that in Rome, punishment wasn't just about death. It was about making sure your soul had no idea which way was up. Fringe detail? There's a theory that sometimes the sack wasn't sewn all the way shut until the very last second, so spectators could watch the chaos first, like a preview before the drowning finale. A kind of Roman trailer, if you will. Even mainstream scholars admit this punishment went through stages. Early on, it didn't always include all four animals. Some versions just used a snake. In later centuries, when Rome became Christianized, the punishment morphed. Some emperors replaced the sack with beheading. Others brought back the full bestiary. And sometimes, the crime didn't even need to be proven fully. If public opinion swung hard enough, that was good enough for the sack. You float now, suspended somewhere between panic and numbness. The rooster has gone still. The monkey's tail lies limp. The water seeps in. Your last thoughts are strangely clear. I should have been nicer to my mother. The river closes over you. The sack disappears into its depths, a sinking capsule of chaotic judgment. Later, children will whisper about the day they saw it happen. One boy will swear he saw the monkey escape through a seam and swim to shore. Completely false, but terrifying enough to stick in folklore. Rome's legal system was many things: structured, advanced for its time, and brutally symbolic. And this wasn't just about justice. It was about fear. Fear of breaking nature's law. Fear of becoming legend for the wrong reasons. So next time you ignore a call from your parents, remember the sack, the snake, the monkey with issues. Because in ancient Rome, being a bad kid didn't just get you grounded. It got you drowned with farm animals. You're standing in the middle of the forum, sun beating down on the marble. There's a crowd forming, quiet, watching. You're sweating, but it's not from the heat. Today's punishment is not a public flogging or even a Colosseum spectacle. No, today you get to wear the mask. You glance to your side. Soldiers approach, carrying what looks like a decorative helmet. But as they get closer, you see it isn't ornamental. It's a mask made of solid metal, cast to fit a human face. The inside gleams ominously, too smooth, too polished. You try to pull away, but hands grab your arms. Then they bring out the ladle. This is the muta persona, a fringe punishment whispered more often than confirmed. According to lore, it was used on spies, traitors, or those who dared to publicly insult the emperor. The idea? Humiliation, terror, and sometimes permanent silence. The metal mask is clamped onto your face. It's tight, and you can barely breathe. Then, molten lead is poured in through a funnel above the headpiece, slowly, deliberately. Not enough to kill you on contact, At least not right away, but enough to disfigure, maim, or turn your last breath into a silent scream. You don't even get to cry out. It's a mask of anonymity, of judgment, of being silenced. Modern historians debate whether this was a one-off event or an urban myth exaggerated by later writers. Still, several fringe references exist, usually tucked inside angry letters or moralistic plays, suggesting the use of molten metal as punishment for blasphemy or betrayal. And while many agree the lead mask wasn't common policy, it may have been employed selectively, reserved for the kind of criminal who needed to be erased with flair. As the mask slides into place, you notice the face on it. It's expressionless, blank, as if Rome wanted to mock your last moments by replacing you with a silent, indifferent stranger. There's no mercy, no trial at this point, just ceremony. One whisper from a senator, one misinterpreted joke about the emperor's nose, and suddenly, you're a lesson. The heat climbs. The crowd stays quiet, almost reverent. A few flinch when they hear the hiss of hot metal. Others watch with detached curiosity, like they're observing someone burn incense. You wonder if this moment will be remembered, or if your face, now encased in metal, will be discarded and replaced tomorrow. There's also a twist. Some accounts suggest the masks were reused, once cooled and removed. Assuming the victim lived long enough for that to matter, the same mask would be applied to someone else, which frankly is a level of budget-conscious horror that only Rome could invent. You stagger. The mask is heavy. You smell your own skin searing. Your vision pulses. But you don't fall, not yet. Rome isn't done with you. They might parade you through the forum first, mask on, wounds hidden beneath a cloak, so everyone can wonder, who was that? What did they do? You're not allowed to scream. You wouldn't be heard if you tried. Later, when scholars discuss punishments in ancient Rome, this one almost always gets passed over. Too niche, too eerie, not enough hard evidence. But some believe that's intentional, that Rome buried the most symbolic punishments deep, like cursed scrolls hidden under the floorboards. Because when you burn someone's face off in silence, it's not about justice anymore. It's about ritual. It's about saying, you can be unmade. The mask grows heavier. The world around you fades to gray. Somewhere, a child drops a fig. A pigeon lands on a statue's head. Life in Rome continues. And your face, if it still resembles one, melts quietly beneath a mask no one wants to remember. You're in the Colosseum now, but not for the reason you'd hoped. No bread, no games. No, you're the game today. You're standing at the center of the arena, dust clinging to your legs, eyes adjusting to the sunlight that pours down like judgment from the gods. The gates across from you creak open, and a creature steps out. But it's not what you'd expect. Not a lion, not a bear, not even an elephant with armor, which, by Roman standards, was a regular Tuesday. No, this is something stranger. A rhinoceros, and it's angry. This, you quickly realize, is a damnatio ad bestias, a condemnation to beasts. One of Rome's most theatrical and humiliating death sentences. They used it for traitors, deserters, rebels, and just about anyone who annoyed the state enough to deserve public erasure. But this wasn't just about execution. This was Roman reality TV, live, messy, and painfully interactive. Now you've heard about gladiators. You've probably even fantasized about being one just for the aesthetic. But this isn't that. You don't get armor. You don't get a sword. Maybe, if the organizers are feeling cheeky, you'll get a stick. The crowd roars. Not for you. They're cheering for the animal, for the moment, for the blood they expect. And oh, the Romans could be brutal in their creativity. Sometimes they'd tie people to stakes and smear them in honey to attract wild animals. Other times, they'd dress you in ridiculous costumes, like a mythological figure, and stage your death as performance art. Imagine being forced to dress like Orpheus, then mauled by a leopard while a flute player provides background music. It happened. The rhino snorts, pawing at the dirt. It charges. You dodge, barely, and feel the breeze of its horn passing by your ribs. You've never moved so fast in your life, and yet you know this is only delaying the inevitable. One mainstream fact: these executions weren't only for criminals. Early Christians were often subjected to damnatio ad bestias as both punishment and public warning. Tertullian, an early Christian author, wrote bitterly about friends being torn apart while the crowd laughed and clapped. And here's a fringe detail for your nightmares. There's a recorded case, just one, where a man was strapped naked to a chariot, his body smeared with raw meat, and then paraded around the arena before being loosed among hyenas. This wasn't for justice. It was dinner theater. Your bare feet slip on the sand. The rhino circles back, slower this time, sizing you up. You consider running, but where? There's no exit, only gates that lock you in with the creature. You yell something, maybe a prayer, maybe a curse, but no one can hear you over the cheers. Historians still argue whether these executions served any legal purpose or were purely psychological warfare. Were they about justice, or just about keeping the population entertained, scared, and obedient? Because here's the twisted brilliance of it all. The crowd doesn't see themselves in you. They see distance. They think, that won't be me. I pay my taxes. I bow when I'm told. But all it takes is one wrong word, one bad rumor, one powerful person with a grudge. You fall. The rhino is faster than it looks. Its horn scrapes your side, drawing blood. It backs up again. You try to crawl. There's a stick nearby, more symbolic than useful. You grab it anyway, because that's what humans do. We hope, even when we shouldn't. Somewhere above, an official waves his hand. A second gate opens. This time, it's a leopard. Because why settle for one animal when two will do? You're a lesson now, a cautionary tale. Parents will tell their kids, mind your manners, or you'll end up like him, torn between a cat and a rhino. There's a strange beauty to the sand now, the patterns it makes under your blood. You feel oddly detached. Is this what they mean by meeting your fate with dignity? You hope you look dramatic enough to be remembered, though you know you won't be, because the arena always moves on. More prisoners, more beasts, more cheers, and above it all, the emperor watches from his shaded seat, expression unreadable, sipping wine. Tomorrow, the stands will be scrubbed, the sand raked smooth again, and your name forgotten. You're walking through the streets of ancient Rome, barefoot and exhausted, a heavy wooden yoke chained across your shoulders. Each step grinds the iron cuffs tighter into your skin. The crowd parts reluctantly as you pass, not in sympathy, but to avoid being splashed by the slop thrown at you from nearby windows. This is fustuarium, not the grand theatrical execution of the Colosseum, but something far more intimate and somehow more chilling. A punishment not for treason or rebellion, but for failure. You didn't run from battle. You didn't try to overthrow the Senate. No, your crime was deserting your unit, losing your sword, or maybe just falling asleep while on guard duty. In Rome's brutal military code, that was enough. So now you're being marched toward the punishment ground, surrounded by your fellow soldiers. They're quiet, somber, but not because they pity you. They know what's coming. They're about to be your executioners, because fustuarium was different. This wasn't a decision handed down by a judge or a senator. It was handed down by your brothers in arms. A cohort tribunal would vote on your guilt, and if found guilty, they wouldn't hand you over to a hangman. They would beat you to death themselves, with clubs. No armor, no trial by combat, no hope of glory. Just wooden rods, swung hard, over and over. Mainstream historians agree this was a disciplinary ritual unique to the Roman army. The purpose wasn't just punishment, it was purification. The unit needed to cleanse itself of shame. And your broken body was the ritual broom. You finally reached the designated clearing, a dusty spot just outside camp, shielded by trees but close enough for others to hear the impact. They make you kneel. The yoke is removed. The silence is thick. And then, the first club falls. The blows come from all directions. There's no rhythm to it, no ceremony. It's not fast. And that's the worst part. You don't get a clean break, a heroic last stand. Just pain. Thudding, cracking, relentless. Fringe accounts suggest some soldiers tried to escape mid-beating, only to be dragged back and struck harder. Others report that men tasked with delivering the punishment sometimes wept as they did it. But still, they did it. They had to. Because if they didn't, if they refused to strike you, they risked suspicion themselves. Rome's military was built on iron loyalty and the fear of shame. A soldier who hesitated to carry out fustuarium might be next in line. You collapse, barely breathing, your body a swollen map of welts and fractures. You wonder if anyone remembers your name, or if you've become just another story to scare recruits. Historians still argue whether fustuarium was purely punitive or partly superstitious, an offering to Mars, or perhaps to Fortuna, to reset the moral balance of the legion. Some Roman writers even claimed the soul of the army could sour if betrayal was left unpunished. You're fading now. Vision blurs. One last club cracks against your temple. Blackness rushes in. Later, new recruits will be shown the patch of earth where it happened. That's where Centurion Marcus got what he deserved. Someone will whisper, though they won't be sure what you did. Only that you died in disgrace. And that's the real sting. Rome didn't always need lions or molten masks to break you. Sometimes they just needed your friends. You wake up in chains. Again. But this time, you're not in a dungeon or on your way to the Colosseum. You're in a cart, bouncing along a rough road, with dust in your throat and iron cuffs rattling at your ankles. The guards barely glance at you. They don't have to. You're not escaping. You're going to the mines. Rome had many ways to punish those who crossed the line, but damnatio ad metallum, condemnation to the mines, was less theatrical and far more soul-crushing. It was the punishment for those not worth executing quickly, enemies of the state, prisoners of war, sometimes even political dissidents or outspoken philosophers. A slow punishment, one that didn't kill you right away, but made sure you wished it had. They don't take you to some charming hillside quarry. You're being delivered to one of Rome's deep mining pits in Spain or Dacia, or maybe a sulfur mine in Sicily, which smells like rotten eggs and burns your lungs with every breath. You're shoved from the cart and herded down into the earth, into darkness so complete it feels like a second skin. The air is damp, stinging. Somewhere above, sunlight still exists, but you won't be seeing it again for a long time, if ever. You're handed a pickaxe and pointed toward a jagged rock wall already dripping with sweat from the men who came before you. Most of them are gaunt, hunched, eyes glassy from staring at flickering oil lamps for years. No one talks, not because they're unfriendly, but because they're too tired. Your job is to extract precious ore, silver, gold, lead, or tin, day in, day out, until your body gives out, or until you disappear into one of the many cave-ins, gas pockets, or sudden collapses that are basically just part of the job description. Mainstream historians confirm that Roman mines were among the most dangerous labor environments in the ancient world. Pliny the Elder even described them as terrible places where men die daily for a metal that corrupts the soul. And here's the real kicker. Most of the silver and gold that fueled Rome's opulence, its goblets, its temples, its imperial coinage, came from places like this, from people like you. There's a fringe theory that prisoners in the sulfur mines were sometimes used as torch holders, forced to stand naked in tunnels with burning resin-soaked rags to provide light. Their skin, historians note, often developed lesions from prolonged exposure to sulfur fumes. Not exactly a career goal. You try to pace yourself, but there is no pacing here. Overseers with whips prowl the corridors, enforcing quotas with lashes and threats. Food is a kind of watery porridge, served twice a day if you're lucky. Water is brackish and rationed. If you're injured, well, bad news. You'll either be dragged off to die quietly in a side tunnel, or just left where you fall, buried in dust and forgotten. Some men go blind. Others go mad. The longer you stay, the more the line between day and night dissolves. You forget what year it is, what your name is, what sunlight feels like. Historians still argue whether damnatio ad metallum was considered a death sentence in all but name. Some ancient legal texts frame it as perpetual servitude, while others describe it more bluntly, the living tomb. There are even rumors, unconfirmed, but persistent, that some prisoners tried to dig upward in the hopes of escape, only to break into a gas pocket and suffocate instantly. Others allegedly bribed guards for a quicker death. Poison, a smuggled dagger, anything to avoid another sunrise underground. You dream of the surface sometimes. Not freedom, exactly, just air that doesn't taste like iron, a breeze, the sound of birds. Your memory of those things is fading, like a coin rubbed smooth over time. Occasionally, someone dies beside you. There's no ceremony. Their body is stripped of usable clothes and tools, then pushed into a trench, or, if it's a good day, pulled out and dumped above ground. Maybe burned. Maybe not. It depends on whether the guards feel like climbing the ladder. And here's the wildest part. Rome didn't only send criminals to the mines. Sometimes slaves, debtors, even defeated kings were thrown in as punishment. A few historians believe an actual royal heir once died in a copper shaft, forgotten under centuries of rock and blood. You cough, again. This time it's deeper. Wet. You wipe your mouth and see red. Not paint, not rust. You're becoming part of the mine now. A voice calls for you to move. You obey. Because what else can you do? You're chained to a post in the forum, wrists bound above your head, back bared to the sunlight and the eyes of strangers. You squint against the brightness and see people stopping to watch. Some with curiosity, some with disgust, and a few with that quiet smirk of someone who's just thrilled it's not them up there. You're about to be flogged. Publicly. Now, compared to being tossed to a rhinoceros or worked to death in a mine, this might seem like a mild punishment. But don't get cozy. This isn't your average wrist slap. Roman flogging, flagellatio, wasn't designed just to hurt. It was designed to humiliate. You hear the whip before you feel it. A sharp crack slices the air, followed by a silence that somehow makes it worse. Then pain, hot, immediate, electrifying. You jolt against the post. The crowd leans in. In Rome, flogging wasn't just for slaves. Sure, they got the worst of it. But if you were a citizen and committed a crime just bad enough for a public warning, you might still end up like this, on display. Petty theft, repeated drunkenness, verbal abuse of a magistrate. Anything that annoyed the wrong person at the wrong time could earn you a public lashing. The whips used, sometimes simple leather straps. Other times, they were weighted with metal or had bone fragments woven in. The worst version was the flagrum, short, cruel, often used for executions later on. You hope today's is less artistic. Another crack, another scream. Not yours this time. Someone else nearby is also being flogged. Ah, a double feature. Rome did love a good pairing. Mainstream historians note that flogging in ancient Rome was highly performative. It was as much about the crowd as the criminal. Magistrates might order a flogging not because they believed it would reform you, but because it showed the public that order was being maintained, that no one, not even a citizen, was above being shamed. You count the lashes, not because it helps, but because it's something to do. 6, 7, 8. The sting deepens, layers over itself. Your skin is fire. Blood starts to bead, then run. And here's a quirky little detail. Some punishments were deliberately paired with mockery. There are recorded cases of people being flogged while wearing a dunce cap, or with signs around their necks listing their crimes in rhyme. One graffiti from Pompeii depicts a man tied to a post with the words, "I sang too loudly in the baths," scrawled above him. So, lesson learned. Indoor voices. The crowd shifts. Someone laughs. You don't know if it's at you or someone else. Doesn't matter. You're the spectacle now. Historians still argue whether flogging served more as a deterrent or a degradation. Did it make people behave or just make them bitter? Cicero once described flogging as the wound to honor worse than any wound to flesh. And in Roman society, honor meant everything. If you were a slave, it was just another Tuesday. If you were a citizen, it could destroy your reputation for life. People would remember, they'd whisper, "That's the guy who got flogged for insulting the censor." Or, "That's the woman who cheated the temple fund." Even worse, if you were someone of status, you might be spared the whip, but still forced to witness your own servants being flogged in your place. Because public punishment was flexible like that, always humiliating, sometimes transferable. You lose track of time. The sun beats down. You're dizzy now, but they haven't stopped. The lash lands on your shoulder blade, then your lower back. They're covering all the terrain. You wonder if they'll stop soon. You wonder if there's a minimum or a maximum. Sometimes the law says 40 lashes. Sometimes it just says, until the blood runs clear. Then finally, nothing, just breathing. Yours, ragged. And the crowds, bored. They're already walking away, eyes searching for the next distraction. A guard unties you roughly. You slump forward. They let you fall. The stones are warm beneath your face. You hear a child ask, "Why did they hurt that man?" And an adult answers, "Because he deserved it." Do you? Does it matter? You're in a room that reeks of oil, ash, and stale wine. Your head is spinning, not from drink, but from confusion. Around you, Torches flicker against marble columns, casting long shadows. At the center stands a tall bronze bull, life-sized, gleaming, and hollow. You've seen it before on coins and frescoes, but you never thought you'd stand beside it. The guards grip your arms tighter. A man in fine robes, probably a local magistrate or priest, gives a subtle nod. It's happening. You're being sentenced to death by brazen bull. Invented, so the legend goes, by a man named Perillos of Athens. The brazen bull, or bull of Phalaris, was a hollow bronze sculpture with a side hatch and an internal system of acoustic tubes. You were placed inside, locked in, and then a fire was lit underneath. Slowly, methodically, the metal would heat, roasting you alive. As you screamed, the sound would travel through the bull's tubes and come out of its mouth, sounding like the roar of an actual bull. Yes, someone designed that, with musical effects. Mainstream historical sources disagree on how widely it was used. Some argue it was limited to Sicily or eastern provinces, while others suggest it was adopted symbolically across the empire, used for traitors, heretics, or as theatrical execution at imperial feasts. The magistrate gestures. The hatch opens with a creak, revealing the bronze interior. It's blackened with soot and still faintly warm. You catch the scent of charred flesh, old, crusted deep in the metal like a permanent ghost. You struggle, but it's pointless. They shove you in, folding your limbs awkwardly to fit. It's claustrophobic. Every breath you take echoes. Then the door slams shut, the echo becoming a gong in your ears. And then, silence. Except for the hiss of flame catching wood. The fire is building now, licking the belly of the bull. At first, it's just warm, then hot, then unbearable. You thrash, trying to find space, but the walls are close, unforgiving. Your skin prickles, then blisters, and all the while, the sound of your screams begins to change, warped by the pipes, transformed into an eerie animalistic howl that spills into the hall outside. People flinch. Some cover their ears. Others lean in, morbidly fascinated. A fringe theory claims that the sound was tuned by the creator to imitate sacred animal calls, and that executions were sometimes held during festivals to entertain the gods. If true, you're not just dying, you're performing. Historians still argue whether the brazen bull was ever used in Rome proper, or whether it was a Greek myth that Rome copied and embellished for effect. But archaeological finds, small-scale bronze bulls with internal tubing, suggest that someone found the idea fascinating enough to recreate. According to legend, the bull's inventor, Perillos, was himself the first victim, locked in by the tyrant he gifted it to. Because, well, irony. Your mind starts to fragment now. The heat is too much. You feel your hair singe, your lips crack, your voice is raw, your throat dry, your body too weak to move. Still, the sound from the bull's mouth continues, long, eerie, distorted. To those outside, it probably sounds like a beast in agony. Maybe they even believe it is. The metal glows a dull orange. You can't scream anymore. You can't breathe. Your consciousness flutters, caught between pain and panic. Eventually, mercifully, it ends. The fire dies down. The metal cools. The hatch creaks open. And they remove you, blackened, silent, steaming. No one says a word. They don't need to. The bull has spoken. You're knee-deep in mud, clutching a shield that feels too big and a spear that feels too small. Rain is pouring sideways, and the crowd is loving every second of this. No, you're not a soldier. You're a gladiator. Sort of. Welcome to damnatio ad ludum, the punishment of being sent to the games, not as a spectator, of course, as entertainment. You weren't born a fighter. Maybe you were a petty thief, or a rebellious slave, or just someone who ticked off the wrong patrician. Either way, the court decided death in the arena was a fitting finale for your story. You glance around the arena. Not the Colosseum. This one's smaller, maybe in a provincial city, a training ground for newer gladiators or throwaway matches. Still, the sand is soaked with old blood, and the wooden walls are carved with graffiti, names, prayers, insults. Someone scratched a tally, probably their wins. The last mark ends in a long final slash. Mainstream historians agree that damnatio ad ludum was more than just a punishment. It was a contract. If you fought well and survived 3 years, you might earn your freedom. But that was a big if. Most didn't last 3 matches. The gate creaks open. Your opponent steps forward. He's wearing more armor than you. Typical. You've got basic gear, short sword, light shield, barely any training. He's a veteran, probably here to show off. The crowd starts to chant. Your name? Unlikely. Probably something like kill, kill, or blood, blood. Hard to tell through the rain and the echo. You hold your ground. Just. Your knees are shaking. You remember hearing that some victims were drugged before their first fight? Opium, maybe, to dull fear. Not you. You're wide awake, painfully aware. There's a pause. Then the trumpet sounds. He charges. You block, barely. The force rattles your arms. You counter, awkwardly. He laughs. Not cruelly. Just like a man who's done this too many times. You don't die right away. That's the good news. The bad news? He toys with you for a while, slashes your leg, cuts your cheek. The crowd loves it. They always do, when the underdog flails. Eventually, your blade finds his side. It's a weak hit, but it draws blood. The crowd gasps. You stagger back, breathing hard. You think, just maybe, you've earned a second round. A horn blares. The fight is over. The veteran steps back, nods once, and walks off. You collapse. Later, in the holding cells, other condemned men look at you with mild curiosity. One gestures with 2 fingers, a silent question. First match? You nod. He shrugs. Not bad. And that's when it hits you. This isn't a death sentence. It's a job. A horrible, terrifying, blood-slick job. But if you're lucky, or if you become popular enough, they might keep you alive a little longer. Here's a quirky fact. Sometimes the audience could save you. If you fell and raised a finger in surrender, the editor of the games, the guy with the money and the ego, could consult the crowd. Thumbs up? You lived. Thumbs down? You died. It wasn't always consistent, and sometimes the emperor himself would override the crowd just to make a point. But technically, your life could be won by performance. Historians still argue whether the thumb gesture we associate with life and death, pollis verso, meant what we think it did. Some believe thumbs down actually meant mercy, while thumbs up was the sign of drawing the sword. Either way, you hoped for mercy, and rarely got it. You hear footsteps. Another fight is being prepped. It's not yours this time, but soon it will be. You start memorizing faces, counting opponents, studying how they move. You're becoming what Rome wanted, spectacle. But here's the fringe theory. Some scholars suggest that certain condemned men, those with charisma, luck, or sheer tenacity, became full-time gladiators, sponsored by schools, trained in earnest. They weren't supposed to live, but they did. One even became a minor celebrity, his face stamped on tavern walls. You lie back against the cold stone. heartbeat slowing, the sting of your cut dulling. You survived. Today, you're shackled, barefoot, and standing on a wooden platform in the middle of the Roman marketplace. Not for flogging this time. This punishment is more psychological, a kind of ancient PR disaster, infamia made visible. A Roman clerk reads your crime aloud for the gathered crowd. Adultery, maybe, or fraud. Or perhaps you just insulted a high-ranking official in public. Whatever it was, it's earned you public shame, not physical pain. Yet, you're wearing a toga pula, the dark toga of mourning, though no one's died, except maybe your reputation. And now, your head is shaved. That's the Roman equivalent of putting someone in a dunce cap dipped in acid. Some historian types call this the social death penalty. And tonight, you're feeling every inch of it. The Romans were obsessed with honor, reputation, and public standing. So instead of always executing or torturing people, sometimes they just ripped their social status to shreds. Infamia was one of the most powerful forms of punishment because it followed you forever, like a bad credit score that everyone could see. And here's the kicker. It didn't always come from a court. Sometimes just being seen in the wrong kind of trial or working the wrong kind of job could get you labeled infamies. Gladiators, actors, prostitutes, pimps, and even undertakers, all on Rome's naughty list, no matter how rich or talented you were. You feel the eyes. Children giggle. An old man spits. A woman whispers something and laughs. Your cheeks burn hotter than the midday sun. There's a slate hanging from your neck with your crime etched in blocky Latin. It's designed to be read at a distance. The letters are big. You're not just being shamed, you're being advertised. A quirky fact. In some cases, Roman officials made the convicted carry symbolic objects. Thieves might lug a heavy coin. False witnesses could be made to walk around with a sign reading, "I lied." One recorded punishment had a woman forced to parade with a wooden goose strapped to her neck. Don't ask why. Probably to drive home the shame with a touch of absurdity. There's no blood, no bruises, and yet, somehow, this feels worse. You know that after this, you'll be marked. Infamia wasn't just gossip. It had legal consequences. You couldn't testify in court, couldn't hold office. In some cases, you couldn't even write a will. Historians still argue whether infamia was enforced uniformly or used selectively, depending on social class. Some say patricians could skate by with a warning, while plebs got paraded around like clowns. Others argue the real difference wasn't class, but connections. You catch a glimpse of a magistrate watching from the edge of the crowd, arms folded, looking satisfied. Maybe this was personal. Maybe this wasn't just about justice, but about spectacle. Rome loved a spectacle. Eventually, a guard waves you off the platform. Your legs are stiff, your shoulders tight, your soul slightly smaller than when you climbed up. But the punishment isn't over. You're taken to the pila, the Roman version of a public notice board, where they're about to nail your name. It'll stay there for weeks, months, years, if no one bothers to remove it. Anyone who passes by can see it. This is Rome's long-term memory. It's made of nails and ink and judgmental whispers. Some poor soul walks by, sees your sign, and clucks their tongue like they just tasted something bitter. You want to vanish, but there's nowhere to go. And here's where things get really weird. Certain infames became folk heroes, especially performers or gladiators. The worse their record, the bigger their following. A former thief turned mime became a crowd favorite in the forum. A disgraced senator turned poet wrote scathing verses that people passed around like forbidden candy. So there's a strange kind of freedom in it. Once your name's already been dragged through every gutter, what else can they do? You sit by a fountain, watching your sign flutter in the breeze. Some kids throw olives at it and cheer when they hit. You laugh, just a little. It's the first time you've laughed all day. The walls are smooth and cold. Dampness seeps into your bones. You've been underground before, maybe in a cellar, maybe in a crypt, but nothing like this. This place doesn't just hold prisoners, it swallows them. Welcome to the Tullianum, better known as the Carcer, Rome's most infamous prison. Or rather, not a prison in the modern sense, more like a holding pen for the doomed. You're not here for a sentence. You're here to wait, for execution, for starvation, or just for someone powerful enough to remember you exist. The cell is carved directly into the Capitoline Hill, with no windows, barely any light, and one entrance, a hatch above. The air smells of mold and rust. There are no beds, no torches, no guards inside, just you and the darkness. And, as your eyes adjust, maybe one or two other figures huddled in corners, silent as statues. Historically, the Tullianum was reserved for the worst of the worst: traitors, defeated kings, political enemies. It's where Jugurtha, the Numidian king, was starved to death. Where Vercingetorix, the Gallic rebel, waited 6 years before his final parade and execution. It's not the kind of place people walk out of. You shuffle toward the wall, sliding your back against it. It's slimy. You try not to think about what's growing here. Some say the name Tullianum comes from Tullus Hostilius, an early Roman king who supposedly built it. Others argue it was named for a spring once buried underneath, because irony, obviously. You can hear dripping water somewhere, not near you, not reachable. The quirky bit? This place had 2 levels. You're in the lower one, the Lautumii, the death chamber. It was sometimes used for ritual executions. One opening above, one drain below. Bodies didn't linger. Outside, you hear footsteps. The hatch groans. A bucket is lowered on a frayed rope. It swings once, lazily. Inside, a crust of bread. Maybe water. No spoon, no cup. You grab it fast. So does the figure across from you. Your hands collide. You both freeze. Then without a word, you each take a piece. Welcome to prison etiquette. No one talks much here. What's the point? You don't have years to pass. Maybe days. Maybe hours. You try to sleep. You fail. Someone's muttering near the wall. Praying, maybe. Or remembering. You catch fragments of a name. Perhaps a child, a lover, someone they'll never see again. Historians still argue whether Rome's prisons were primarily for punishment or just temporary containment. Some believe most criminals weren't locked up at all. They were beaten, fined, or executed, but not warehoused. That's what makes the Tullianum special. It wasn't built to reform. It was built to erase. You start to imagine your own fate. Will it be strangulation? That's what they gave Sejanus. A fast, efficient garrote. Or maybe you'll be let out, paraded in chains, your final breath spent entertaining the crowd. But then you remember something. A story whispered about a man who survived this place, who charmed a guard, or bribed a senator, or faked his own death and slipped out in a wine cart. It's probably just a story. Still, maybe you'll be the next one. You laugh softly, just to hear a sound that isn't dripping water or someone whispering to ghosts. It echoes strangely. A flutter of bats overhead stirs the stale air.
Then it goes quiet again. Time loses shape in here. No sun, no shadows, just the changing temperature of the walls, the itch of damp clothes, the creak of your joints. Another sound, the hatch again. You brace, but it's not for you. A man is lowered down, blindfolded, bound. He doesn't struggle. He just lands with a dull grunt and stays still. Maybe he's unconscious. Maybe he's accepted it. You scoot over, give him space. That's all you have to offer. One of the older prisoners speaks, barely above a whisper. Name? No answer. The silence stretches. Doesn't matter, the voice says again. None of us have one anymore. And just like that, you're part of something. Not a brotherhood, not a team, just fellow shadows flickering at the edge of history. You're standing in the middle of a massive field, but it doesn't feel open. Not with the ring of soldiers surrounding you, not with the scent of iron in the air. This isn't a battlefield, it's a stage. You've heard whispers about this punishment, fustuarium, beating by cudgel, but it's only ever murmured, like something too ugly for the light. Now it's your turn. You don't get a trial, just a verdict. And not from a magistrate either. This is military law. You're a soldier, and you broke the code. Desertion, theft, maybe falling asleep on guard duty. Any of those will do. One soldier steps forward, then another. Each holds a club, short and thick, polished from use. This isn't personal. They're just obeying the rules. Because if they don't join in, they could be punished too. You glance around, hoping someone might speak up for you. No one does. Roman discipline is sacred. It's one of the reasons they conquered half the known world. Their armies didn't break formation and didn't tolerate weakness. The first blow hits your shoulder, then your side, then your back. No rhythm, no mercy. The strikes come fast, dull thuds echoing against your ribs. You fall, and still they strike. This punishment wasn't rare. In fact, it was disturbingly systematic. If a Roman soldier fled in battle, his unit could execute him by clubbing. If you were accused of stealing, the same. The idea was simple. Shame plus pain equals deterrence. One mainstream source, Livy, describes a soldier who was beaten to death by his own centuria. His group of 80, not one man with a sword, 80 men with sticks, all at once. You can imagine the sound, can't you? Like thunder on bone. But here's the twist. If the punishment didn't kill you outright, and if the commander was feeling generous, you might be spared. Sent back to the camp, bruised and broken, wearing your shame like a second tunic. There's a fringe theory that some commanders used fustuarium politically to get rid of soldiers who questioned orders or seemed too popular. After all, it looked like justice, even when it was just revenge in uniform. You blink through blood, coughing. The blows slow, then stop. Someone checks your breath. Apparently, you're still useful enough to keep around. You're dragged to the medicus, who doesn't look thrilled to see you. He pours wine over your wounds. It burns like betrayal, and mutters something about you being lucky. Lucky isn't the word you'd choose. Historians still argue whether fustuarium was used equally across all legions or only in the most traditionalist ones. Some records show commanders replacing it with decimation, killing every 10th man of a disgraced unit instead. Because yes, when it comes to military discipline, Rome had options. You're left outside the camp to recover. No one speaks to you. You eat last. You carry extra gear. You become a ghost among the living. And yet, you're alive. Your hands tremble when you tie your sandals. You flinch at sudden movements, but something else stirs in your chest. Rage, maybe, or defiance. The Romans taught you discipline. Now you understand what it costs. Later that night, you sit by a dwindling fire, watching sparks rise into the cold sky. You think about the men who struck you. Some flinched, some didn't. Some seemed to enjoy it. You promise yourself, quietly, never again. Not that you'll rebel. That would be stupid, but you'll remember. And maybe someday, when you're the one holding the cudgel, you'll aim lower. You're standing in a long line that moves at a crawl, chained to the man in front of you and dragging your feet like your ankles forgot how to lift. The air smells like oil, sweat, and something metallic underneath. Welcome to the Metalla, Rome's punishment mines. You thought forced labor meant bread ovens or road work. Turns out, you were wrong. Here, punishment means digging into the earth until the earth swallows you. The Romans didn't waste a good set of muscles. If they weren't going to kill you, they'd work you until you begged for it. Criminals, prisoners of war, enslaved debtors, they all ended up here, deep in the quarries and mines that kept Roman infrastructure humming. Silver, lead, iron, salt. If Rome needed it, someone had to dig it out. And guess who just got assigned to the lead mines of Carthago Nova? The entrance to the shaft looks like a mouth. Not a normal one. A hungry one. A guard hands you a pickaxe with a handle smoother than it should be. Too many hands have gripped it. No safety rules. No protective gear. Just don't collapse. Inside, the walls shimmer with silver veins. Pretty, almost. Until you realize you'll be breathing this dust until your lungs look like sponge cake. That's not a joke. Roman mining operations were incredibly toxic. Lead fumes, mercury vapor, and suffocating darkness turned these places into slow-motion death traps. You stumble through narrow tunnels where the ceiling grazes your scalp. Some workers are chained at the waist to the wall, swinging tools with mechanical rhythm. Others are younger, too young, scurrying through gaps to pull out rubble. The quirky part? Some Romans believed the mines were spiritually cursed. They built tiny shrines underground, hoping the gods would overlook them. You pass one carved into the rock, a miniature altar, stained with smoke and maybe a little hope. You swing the pick. Once, twice. The stone groans. A man next to you mumbles something. You catch only a few words. 7 days, no sunlight. His teeth fell out. You don't ask for more. This isn't just punishment. This is exile from the surface world. Historians still argue whether mining sentences were always lifelong, or if some criminals earned their freedom after enough years. Records show both outcomes. A few rare releases, but far more skeletons discovered in collapsed shafts with manacles still around their wrists. You take your first meal down here. It's black bread and something wet they swear is broth. You eat it anyway. Later, the overseer, who smells like he sleeps in the same shirt every night, drags you aside. You've got strong shoulders. That means you're hauling ore carts now. Congratulations. The carts squeal on rusted wheels. You push them uphill while others dig. Every step feels like you're dragging a chariot full of regrets. Sometimes, someone disappears. One day, they're chipping rock beside you. The next, nothing but an empty pick lying crooked. No one asks questions. The stone doesn't answer anyway. You dream that night, or maybe it's just a hallucination. A cool breeze on your face, stars overhead, laughter. Then you wake up, coughing up blood and chalk dust. You grip your pick again. The work continues. Because that's the Roman way. You serve your time. Or you serve until time forgets you were ever alive. Your body isn't your own anymore. It belongs to the state. Or, more precisely, to the ludus, the gladiator school. But don't let the name fool you. There's nothing academic about it. The moment you enter the gates, the scent hits you. Oil, sweat, blood. It clings to the sand in the training yard, bakes into the wood of the weapons rack, settles in the pores of every man standing around you. This is where broken laws meet sharpened blades. Welcome to the life of a damnatus ad gladium, condemned to the sword. You're issued a tunic, rough and short, a wooden practice sword, a lecture from the lanista, the trainer, about dying with dignity, as if that's a choice. And then you train. Endlessly. You fight against straw dummies, then against other men. Not to the death, yet, but hard enough to break bones. The lanista walks between you like a gardener pruning trees, correcting stances with a sharp tap or a barked insult. He's not cruel exactly, just efficient. You're an investment. Your meat, polished into spectacle. The mainstream history books like to glamorize it. Gladiators as celebrities, fans throwing flowers, freedom possible after enough victories. And yes, some of that was real. But not for you. You weren't bought. You were condemned. That means your chances of surviving a year? Slim. Your first time in the arena is a blur, not the Colosseum. That comes later, if you're lucky. This is a smaller venue, a training match for the crowd. You're matched with another new recruit. He looks more scared than you. The crowd chants. You don't hear the words. You only hear the drum in your chest. The referee shouts. You lunge. Your swords clack. He stumbles. You press the advantage, not out of anger, but because stopping would get you killed. The fight ends quickly. You win. Barely. No one dies today. The crowd still cheers. They love seeing fear. You're dragged back to the cells, dark, crowded, surprisingly clean. The lanista nods at you. You might last a while. You're too tired to care. Here's the quirky bit. Gladiators had surprisingly good medical care. The medicus assigned to your ludus knows anatomy better than most surgeons today. Because an injured fighter was a financial loss, and a dead one was even worse, unless the crowd demanded it. Some schools even gave their gladiators high-protein diets, mostly beans and barley. You're essentially a carb-loaded killing machine. Still, you're watched constantly. Talk of rebellion simmers under the surface. Everyone remembers Spartacus. Well, not remembers exactly. He died a century ago. But the idea of Spartacus haunts this place. The slave who broke his chains and took thousands with him. The one who stared down Rome. Even if they nailed 6,000 of his followers to crosses along the Appian Way, the legend survives. You wonder what kind of man does that. Maybe the kind who loses everything. Maybe the kind who has nothing left to fear. Historians still argue how many condemned criminals survived the arena. A few rose to fame, earned freedom, became instructors. But most became footnotes, bones in the sand, names lost in the roar of the crowd. Your next fight is scheduled. You sharpen your blade, check your armor, tighten the strap on your shoulder guard. You're not fighting for Rome, not for glory. You're fighting because they made you. And one day, if the stars align just right, maybe you'll make them regret it. And now, the sand settles. The swords are sheathed. The torches in the arena flicker low, and the roar of the crowd fades into silence, like a tide retreating from shore. Your body, once coiled with tension, begins to relax. Your heartbeat slows. The chains around your wrists, imaginary now, dissolve. You're not in the mines. You're not in the dungeon. You're not beneath the Colosseum's stands, waiting to fight for your life. You're right here, safe in the quiet of your room, in the hush of late night hours. The air is still. Maybe there's a soft hum in the background. Your fan, your window cracked open, the distant sound of someone else's world winding down. And in this calm, you remember. History was never just about emperors and battles and marble statues. It was about ordinary people, people like you, who found themselves in impossible situations, clinging to slivers of hope, scraps of dignity, even humor, even love. People who survived more than we'll ever truly know. So, let that thought carry you gently into sleep. You've walked through the strangest corners of ancient Rome tonight and returned wiser, heavier with stories, but somehow lighter too. Tomorrow can be gentle. Tonight has already been enough.